Hello and welcome to our online expert talk about open collaboration and the human factor. Thank you for joining us today. This event is brought to you by Bene Belgium and our partners Nespresso Professional and Living Tomorrow. My name is Julia Joly. I'm part of the marketing team here at Bene, working out of Paris. I will be your moderator for today. I will be joined by our three guest speakers and leading workplace experts. We will begin with Doctor in Neuropsychology, Elke Geraerts, who will guide us through the concept of authentic intelligence and explain what makes us human so unique. We will continue with designer Tom Lloyd, who will show us how design can respond to the challenges of the day, especially when it comes to leadership and collaboration. And to finish with, we will host digital champion Saskia van Uffelen, who will show us why we need to dare today for tomorrow and how we can help build a better society through personal choices. On top of that, we really would like to hear from you. So ask questions, share your comments, and use the question mark panel on the right side of your GoToWebinar player. We will share some of your questions after every speaker's speech. And last but not least, we'll have my colleague Leo on our side for the technical support today. Thank you, Leo. At this point, I want to introduce our first speaker so we can get into our content. Hello, Elke.
Hello, Julia.
So Elke Geraerts has a PhD in psychology and has held various academic positions at the universities of Harvard, St. Andrews, Maastricht, and Rotterdam. She is the co-founder and CEO of Better Minds at Work, and she wrote the bestsellers Mental Capital and the one which is interesting for us today, Authentic Intelligence. Elke's trademark is the unique way in which she translates psychological insights into fresh and accessible day-to-day applications, both for individuals and organizations, which is exactly what we need. Elke, welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Julia, and good afternoon to everyone. Greetings from Antwerp. I'll be talking to you about authentic intelligence, and I'll explain in a bit what this actually means. Now, the COVID-19 crisis has caused me to do a lot of walking, getting back into the nature, often amongst with friends. And a while ago, I invited one of my study friends from university, Simon. Now, Simon to me is like a real career tiger, from one job to the other, higher and higher, and always like very brainy guy. And I expect during the last walk that Simon would tell me about his next move on his career ladder, but nothing of that. Simon is walking next to me in the woods with almost no energy. And of course, with my psychology degree, I start asking questions to find out what's going on with Simon. And finally, he gets there. He says, well, Elke, apart from the COVID-19 crisis, there's been a huge loss in our company. Like many people had to go because of the automation. And I'm starting to wonder whether I will still be relevant in the future of work. And actually, ladies and gentlemen, this is a question that I hear very often. Employees who are getting worried whether they'll still be relevant in the future with all these robots taking over a lot of our tasks. And indeed, research shows that by 2022, 75 million jobs worldwide will be performed by AI. By 2030, about 1 in 3 jobs will be performed by AI. Nevertheless, aside from these statistics, it's also quite hopeful because research also shows that there will be as much new jobs that we don't really know the content about, what it exactly will be, but it's clear that there will be a lot of new jobs. Now, importantly there, it will be that we as human beings invest in our mental capital. I wrote about it in my book, Better Minds, and the good news is that we as human beings are very resilient, very agile, and I believe that the crisis has shown that we can reinvent ourselves all the time. Maybe you remember this guy, Garry Kasparov, a Russian chess king who at some point in his great career lost a game of chess from a computer. And instead of worrying about his loss, he said something wise. Instead of worrying about what machines can or cannot do, we should better think about what we can do that they can do. And that's exactly how I see it. And that's what I call our authentic intelligence. We as human beings have a lot of unique qualities that distinguish us from the robots. And in the future of work, it will be vital to know what your own AI is, your authentic intelligence, and make sure to invest in it as a human being, as a team, and as an organization. Now, let's dive into a few of the ingredients briefly in the next minutes, and pick your own ingredients, how you could make a change in your AI and of the people around you. First, it means that we need to reprogram ourselves. Not only computers can do it, but we as human beings are very skilled in starting over and over again with a new clean slate. Another thing that makes us really unique is our willpower, our power to resist. And finally, our creativity, our imagination that has brought us so many things. It allowed us to build cities, skyscrapers, create ice cream and AI. Now, let's take a brief look at the first one, reprogramming. That's the basics of being sustainable in the future of work. Now, if we talk about the basics, we have to go back to where it all started. While you were being born, a lot was already determined. Where you grew up, with whom, where you were born, what kind of surprises your life would have in store for you. It's all determined. Research actually shows that 60% is determined by nature and only 40% by nurture. So it means that only on 40% of yourself you can have an impact. And honestly, I'm starting to wonder whether we are. Are we still in our own willpower? Take a look at this picture. How often does it happen that we're driven by technology, by smart AI, artificial intelligence? Maybe some of you have young kids at home. If you observe those kids, you see that they love to explore the world. For instance, these kids here, my girls from 4 and 5 years old, who are happy to feel wet water. I said, wet water, Mom? When was the last time that you were surprised when feeling wet water? You might think now, what is this kind of webinar? Is it teaching me about wet water? But then something might be happening in your brain, ladies and gentlemen. I like to relate it to something that happened to me a while ago before the COVID-19 crisis. I was invited in a company building to give a speech on mental resilience. The HR manager introduced me and she said to the people, like, turn off your cell phones. And at that moment, about 400 eyes were rolling and I could feel the resistance. And at that moment, I decided to start my speech totally differently. I said to them, well, probably you felt obligated to come to this talk. Maybe your boss told you so. And I saw many people nodding. After that, I said to them, well, there's probably a huge pile of work on your desk, and now you have to sit here with me. But it's probably a trick of your management. If you know your brain better, you can even work more. Of course, at that moment, I had their attention. And then I flipped and I said to them, but how is it possible that you come to a talk about your own brain and that you don't think, what can I learn from this? What can I learn for myself, for my kids, for everyone around me? Afterwards, the HR manager came to me and she said, thanks, this was really an eye-opener. At some point, it should be clear to take up more ownership. I should have briefed you better, but there's a culture of complaining here, a culture of suing. bam, the word was out. The complaining all the time. And actually, I often get reminded about something in my childhood. Maybe you're familiar with Calimero, who often complains about everything. I'm small and they're tall, and it's not fair. I am convinced that if a Calimero were to know a bit better about his brain, you can turn every Calimero in what we at Better Minds at Work call a Calihero. It's the antidote of a Calimero. It's the hero. He takes up ownership. He arranges his life, doesn't matter where he's in the hierarchy. Now, you cannot force someone around you to become a Calihero. You cannot force yourself to be one. But I am convinced, and I often see it happening, if you know a bit more about your brain and especially your mindset, everyone can make that switch. Research at Stanford University has shown that there are two kinds of mindsets. People with a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. The fixed, they think that all their qualities are fixed. It doesn't matter how much time you put in it, this is it. While people with the growth mindset are convinced if you put enough effort and time in it, you can learn everything. People from the fixed mindset don't like feedback. They don't like to look at successful people as threatening. While people with a growth mindset think, what can I learn? It's the yes, but versus the yes, and. Where are you, ladies and gentlemen? How do you face all these things? No matter how senior you are, always try to see yourself as unfinished, as someone who can learn something new. Now, when it comes to learning something new, I like to compare our brain with the jungle, because it is. There's like 86 billion nerve cells in your brain, 85,000 kilometers of pathways, and some huge pathways. You know them. They're your habits. Your neurons always love to take those big pathways because they're easy. And when you ask your brain to learn something new, you actually ask it to cut through the jungle. And then we give up because the goal that we had in mind cannot be reached easily. And we go back to the big pathways. My advice there is stop jumping. Start dancing, not wanting to jump to the goal, but little steps, one step at a time. In your organization, you need to learn to dance and make those little steps as fun as possible and find out who of your colleagues loves which steps. And finally, when it comes to reprogramming ourselves, aside from our mindset and our ability to cut through our jungle, we need to ask feedback. Very often at Better Minds at Work, we don't tell our employees, hey, you did well, super. No, I think that people are fed up with comfort feedback. They want constructive feedback, creating this growth mindset with the right question and remarks, like, how did you prepare? How would you prepare in the future? Your efforts are clearly visible in your work. What would you like to work on in the future? And what do you need to perform better? Totally different conversation, ladies and gentlemen. It's not rocket science, but it's a new way of giving feedback to each other and asking it. So at first, reprogramming. Another very important ability of us human beings is our willpower. Now, do you sometimes have it happen that you hear yourself saying yes to a question while actually inside yourself you think, oh no, did I say yes to it? I'll explain why. It's because I don't want to offend you, there's a chimpanzee in you, the limbic system. It's been there since ancient times. It's always on the lookout for danger, sex, and food. Now, throughout evolution, we've also created a human in us, the prefrontal cortex, which is located here, the youngest part of the brain, which makes us the Homo sapiens. Always thinking, like putting alternatives and thinking about it. Both systems want to put their information in what I call the computer in our brain. Who do you think wins? Of course, the chimpanzee. Before the human has thought about it, the chimpanzee said, yeah. Because the chimpanzee has no patience. He wants it now. The problem, ladies and gentlemen, is that nowadays, our entire world is directed at the chimpanzee in us. If we want to matter in the future, it will be important to put more emphasis on the human in us. The more you listen to the chimpanzees, the less rational decisions you can make. Think about it. How can you make the human more present? It means that you have an ability to say no. And I want to challenge you for the rest of the week. 3 times a day, say no to a specific question that normally the chimp in you, the chimpanzee in you would say yes to. So no existential questions, but little things, and see what it does to your no's, to your ability to say no, but also to your yeses. The yeses aside from the impulse, the yeses to your priorities. Because these days, it seems like we're on this yes highway. We just cruise along, go on and say yes to almost everything without taking a break, enjoying the view, tanking gas again. And we know what happens when we don't do that. Burnout. It's not because we work too hard, but it's become a logical consequence of the efforts we ask from our brain. Research has shown that about 150 times a day, we look at our smartphone. Very often people say, oh, if I have time, I'll do it. Well, here is your time. When was the last time that you had smartphone free time? Because the chimp in you loves your smartphone. It's like eating bananas all the time. And the human of you is dying silently. Think about how you could invest more in that human of you by the ability to say no, to formulate a conscious yes. To do so, we have to find techniques. And one way to convincingly saying yes, you can find in a top sport. Take a look. This is Rafael Nadal, one of the best tennis players ever. See what he does. If you were to put a psychological diagnosis on this, I think some of you would say, oh, he's really crazy or a bit neurotic or obsessive or whatever. A journalist actually asked him why he does this, always with these 2 bottles directed at the field he's going to play at. And Nadal said, well, that's how I put myself in the game. I organize my environment so that it matches the order I'm looking for in my head. Psychologists call this an attention ritual. And you may know from research about Pavlov, the Russian researcher who conditioned his dog by combining a bell and giving food to the dog. We can do the same for our brain, just like the top sporters do when we have to do a peak performance. I already tried it out myself. I created an attention ritual by putting on a certain song of one of my favorite artists, Leonard Cohen. And every time I wanted to go into focus, I put on this specific song. And after about 3 weeks, my brain knew, ooh, she's serious. And all the distracting web pages would just go away. I conditioned my brain. See how it might work for you, not necessarily by listening Cohen, but find something very specific that your brain can set totally in motion to go to focus. Now, aside from this technique, I want to challenge you also to divide your day in elephants and rabbits. You might think, well, it comes from this metaphor. Of course, metaphorically speaking, because I love these animals, when you're hunting elephants, don't get distracted chasing rabbits. The elephants are the priorities that require 100% focus. The rabbits are the issues of the day. Not sure what your rabbits are, but mine are, for instance, phone calls, emails, video calls all day long. Most of the time, we start our day with a fresh brain chasing rabbits. And you know how it ends. The elephant is still on our to-do list. It's important to divide your day clearly in these elephants and rabbits, and if possible, start your day with an energized mind because of the night's sleep with an elephant. See what it could do for you and how you could create a culture at work and also online that you sometimes are able to focus on your elephants. For instance, if I'm in my office, if I put on this, then my colleagues know, ooh, she's in focus. And it creates respect. Instead of a culture of, oh, busy, 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 it goes to a culture of respect for focus. See what it could do for you, ladies and gentlemen. So on the first hand, our ability to reprogram. Secondly, willpower. And let's just take a few minutes to imagination. I'm sure that many of you watching today have a lot of creativity, a lot of imagination, and you can dream many things for you. But if you dive into creativity in companies, it's quite interesting, because research shows that, of course, AI is taking up a lot of the automated jobs. So what will remain? It's the creative jobs. Today, a modern company should invest in its creative capital. It's the most important asset of a modern company. It's people who are able to imagine, innovate, solve problems, and design. These days, it's not anymore, I think, therefore I am, but I imagine, therefore I am. And it's not possible to say, oh, but I'm not a creative person. It happens in the brain. Recently, this was shown by Harvard research, putting many people in the scanner when they were going through their artistic process. And then it showed up for the first time ever. Creativity, not as one hemisphere in our brain that would light up or a certain structure, but no, a network between different brain areas that were all lit up together. That was when creativity happens, as if all the flood doors would go open. And you know this moment. You know it yourself. This moment of insight, the eureka, the hallelujah, I found it. There it is. We have to create time for that moment again. It means allowing ourselves to do mind wandering, or simply put, daydreaming. We have to allow that our mind sometimes recuperates. We cannot always be behind the screen. The chimp on us loves it, but the human needs these moments of recuperations and then to come up with creativity. So, ladies and gentlemen, see how you could invest for yourself in these abilities. Because today, in this digital transformation, it will be important to focus on these human aspects more than ever. It means that we have to motivate ourselves for continuous lifelong learning. Research showed before COVID-19 that we have to make a reset in our careers every decade. And I think that the crisis has made sure that the digital revolution is coming quicker and that we have to reset sooner. It means that we need an authentic yes and to change the system, not the yes but. If you may have thought during my talk, yeah, but it's the fixed mindset. Make sure that you combine some of the ingredients and go to the yes and. Yes and, what can I learn? What can I change? Maybe you've seen this in real life, the Sistine Chapel in Rome, in the Vatican City. I'm always amazed if I see this. Michelangelo, who painted this more than 500 years ago, God and Adam touching hands, and I'm still wondering, I will never know whether it's God pushing him to the world or pulling him back. Two hands on the ceiling. Two other hands on the ceiling, the human and the robot hand. As long as we invest in our authentic intelligence, I'm sure that we can win, that we can make sure that we're sustainable in the future of work. Make sure that you put the chimp of you sufficiently in his cage and that you pay attention to the human in you. So to summarize, think about how you can reprogram, increase your willpower and your imagination for yourself and for the people around you and in your organization. Feel free to link online. We often post on LinkedIn things about this leadership, about authentic intelligence and the future of work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elke, for this very inspiring talk. I think our audience has already a question for you. It would be, is COVID-19 speeding up or slowing down the digital revolution, in your opinion?
Well, that's a very good question, Julia. I believe it's speeding it up very fastly. Very often before COVID-19, companies were telling me, for instance, when it comes to home working, well, we still have to figure out the technology systems and it's not that easy. And well, these days, we're witnessing it right now. We're on GoToWebinar talking to the entire world, if you will. So our digital quotients have to increase for everyone. It doesn't matter which generation. So I'm convinced that it's speeding it up and putting the emphasis even more on making sure that we increase our authentic intelligence.
Okay, thank you very much. I personally have another question for you. You gave us a lot of tips to actually increase our willpower. Do you have anything else that we can, apart from the 3 yes and no during our week, that we can start with to feel comfortable and confident to apply what you told us, which is extremely useful?
So you mean to get more focused, to increase your willpower?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things is that, well, the brain loves delayed gratification. Like there's a carrot waiting for you, and you're probably familiar that sometimes you want to start a certain big task, but you cannot finish it. Your brain wants to go online and check many things. It's the chimp in you, of course. Now, how can you stimulate your brain to get to that point? Is that you put on the end like a delayed gratification, something small. It could be like, after I finish this, I'm gonna take a walk in the woods, or I'm gonna go and read a magazine. Like, you always have to divide your day in chunks and stay attentive and focused, and then recuperate, and then again and again. Most importantly, it's vital that you get to know your brain better, become aware of how it works, how often you have to put the chimp in his cage, and how you can hear your human in you a lot better. It's a lot of fun, actually, to examine this yourselves.
Sounds like it. True. Thank you very much, Elke.
You're welcome.
I have another question from our audience, which just came in. Following your metaphor, when Adam turned to a robot, will humans become God?
Well,
that's a pretty tough and straight to the point question.
Yeah. I think we could spend an entire webinar on that question. I don't think so. I also don't think, as some people would say, that the robots are becoming God. I think there should be a good balance between our authenticity and not wanting to play God, staying noble, and well, correcting ourselves in it. For instance, there's a lot of legislations already these days on artificial intelligence. So behind the scenes, there's already a lot of effort done so that we just respect the human side in us and don't want to play God, or don't let the robots win over us.
I think those are the words of our, how do you say, of the end. Thank you so much, Elke, for
You're
this
welcome.
Great talk, very inspiring talk. I now would like to say thank you and introduce our second speaker, Tom Lloyd. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Julia.
Tom studied at the Royal College of Art and is the co-founder of Pearson Lloyd, which is one of the most successful design studios in Great Britain. And the studio has a long list of international customers like Lufthansa, Virgin Airlines, or the Intercontinental Hotel Group. And Pearson Lloyd and Bene have been working together for a very long time now, and they have successfully launched several collections, including Parks, Timber Table, Nooks, and now Ports, which Tom is going to talk about. So, Tom, I'm very pleased to have you on stage. Stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Elke, for a fantastic presentation. And it's great to be with everyone listening in today. I am here to talk about leadership and talk about how we as an agency have been working with Bene over the last actually 13 years, but also specifically over the last 3 years, to look into how we can understand leadership and understand how organizations can create spaces and facilitate leadership in the best way that it can be. And the point that we want to start on is the idea of change, and that the fact that the world is changing at this extraordinary rate, and Elke was describing perfectly some of those elements, and that actually leadership in a way is always a response to change, and how can we understand that and then use that to develop spaces and solutions to facilitate that. A quick introduction about Pearson Lloyd. Myself and Luke Pearson founded Pearson Lloyd 23 or 4 years ago. We have a very broad portfolio of clients, from aviation to the workplace. Bene is, since 2007, one of our most cherished clients. We also work across healthcare settings, consumer products, and lots of workplace consultancy. One of the core things is really we are always trying to understand the value of design and how design can effectively and creatively impact positively people's experiences of the world. And the idea of change is the ground point of all our work, because we are constantly in this space of change. Just as a frame of reference, in 2009 we launched a collection with Bene called Parks, which was at the very beginning of a new culture of furniture solutions that facilitated and understood the idea of collaboration in the workplace. And for the previous century or so, the desk or the meeting room was almost the two types of space, or the management office was the spaces that were understood, but they really didn't facilitate the maximization of social capital and the maximization of the knowledge economy, which we are now all a part of. And we were very lucky that Parks has become a very influential collection over the last decade, and it's really been a ground point of our relationship. This year we have launched a Ports, which is a new collection of furniture that focuses on leadership. And within the last, probably 5 years ago, we started talking with Bene and saying to ourselves, all the benefits that we found and we understood and we created through the Parks collection, if we started to, we recognized that the management spaces hadn't really had that thinking applied to them and to it. And we thought, well, how can we facilitate a much more fruitful experience and environment for leaders in organizations, using similar thinking processes that we did when we developed Parks in 2009. And as I said at the beginning of this session, the starting point is the principle of change. And we all know, we look around us how quickly the world is changing. And of course, COVID is a perfect example of a black swan event that, even though some people like Bill Gates had warned us of it, the world in a way was not prepared. And this one event can create this extraordinary change around us. And also, as Elke was saying, it's accelerating social, cultural and technological changes that were already in play. So in a strange way, even though we were designing the Ports collection prior to COVID, it's a perfect reflection of the thinking that we used when we were thinking about it. So on the basis that the world is changing, leadership must change with it. And leadership is changing in many different ways. And we used a basic piece of research to try and figure out what that means and how we can convert that into experiences and spaces that can inspire and enhance a leadership experience. So I want to start with the idea of chaos theory, which many of you and us will understand through the idea of the butterfly effect, where a butterfly flapping its wings in one side of the world can create a hurricane or a major weather event in the other, or contribute to it. And we all know, we look around us and we see the changes going on, whether it's the climate crisis, whether it's COVID, whether it's social and political changes like Black Lives Matter. There are these combining effects that are in some ways individual, but collectively have this exponential and unpredictable chain of events that move our world forward. And that's a sort of ground point of what we are trying to figure out as leaders. We're having to sit within this chaos of humanity and try and make progress through that. So we're surrounded by challenges, as I said, whether it's COVID, whether it's climate change and pollution, whether it's deforestation, whether it's fake news and the rise of the sort of more malign aspects of technology. Listening to the radio recently, someone was aligning fire and technology. Fire, when it was invented or discovered by humanity, became this extraordinary tool for cooking and for lighting a space, a cave, but it also became a weapon. And they were aligning that to the idea of technology, which is both this extraordinarily powerful creator for us as humans, but also has this malign effect. And it has become as big a challenge in many ways to us as humans, to our mental health, but also to our social and political reference points as it is a useful tool for managing our daily lives. So there are these, and this isn't at an organizational level, these challenges are global and social and national. They're not really about the individual, but of course they affect us all, and they will continue to affect us all on a daily basis as we go forward. At the same time, there are new emerging challengers out of the challenges, and they really are disrupting previously understood patterns. For example, age. You know, Greta Thunberg, who is now 16, has become one of the great influencers and challengers of our sense of ourselves in the last 2 or 3 years. And it means that you no longer have to wait to be in your later years of life to become a leader. It really sets up everyone as an idea that you can challenge, you can become a challenger at a very young age. There are businesses who are reinventing the way we consume, the way we produce, and the way we access our other services of our lives. These, as in the bottom left image, are so often facilitated by technology. And equally with Elon Musk on the top right, new challenger brands are completely unpicking established industries that have felt completely secure for the last 100 years. So the car industry, the oil industry, the internal combustion engine is now under absolutely existential threat through these surging forwards of new companies like Tesla. And on the bottom right, these social and political movements like Black Lives Matter, that is really challenging the very way in which we see our culture. The whole sense of what is our reference point of history and how we may have to not rewrite history, but re-understand it and reposition ourselves as communities and as societies. So all these things are spinning forward every day around us. There's also, in a way, influencers next to challengers, and sometimes these are just interesting. Kim Kardashian has this huge power on Instagram, but also actually, as our younger children become absolutely natively connected to AI and to technology, you realize that as in the older generation, our sense of what is right and wrong, or our sense of what should come first, is really under threat. There's an image on the top right, which people don't believe when I describe it. It's of sheep running through a gate, but there's actually no fence line. The fence has been taken down, but the sheep are all thinking that there is a fence in place. And that also, it's an expression of crowd mentality, and the fact that we need to also be very aware of who is influencing us and why, and somehow be more critical, self-critical as communities and as individuals. And as Elke was mentioning, the pace of change in a way has never been as slow as it is today. In other words, it's accelerating. The whole idea of the workplace economy, what we will be doing in future decades, is completely unpredictable. So out of this, in a way, this idea of chaos, which is quite destabilizing and quite worrying, we also have to look for patterns. And understanding where the patterns come is also the way in which we think leadership begins to emerge. Because if you can, like the jungle, like Elke's description, if you can plot your way through the chaos, and find patterns to allow yourself to do that, then you can begin to take control of what is seemingly such challenging circumstances. And these are just a few that we have drawn out to try and understand how leadership might be changing. So humility. In other words, COVID has taught us that what was called in the past low-skilled workers maybe have the greatest value. The hierarchy of hierarchy of business and the hierarchy of wealth is not the thing that is actually important in society. Working from home has all given us completely new challenges, and it's forced us all to accept that we are somehow humans at the end of the day. We don't have to always present a face that is untrue. So humility is something that is an incredibly important part of being humble in a way, is a source of great leadership. Cooperation, we can't do things without each other. And again, this challenges in some ways the sense of hierarchy that we need to that we used to experience and expect, and that cooperation at both a social and a street level, but also at a political and a national level, is critical. Learning. We must continue to learn at all times. We're never in control. The people who are most curious are also the ones who, in a way, can make the most progress. And that's not always about career or wealth. It's simply about plotting our way through the world. And maybe at the bottom of this is the idea of agility. And we have two analogies here. One is of jazz and the other one is of martial arts, where actually you improvise, but only within a structure that you understand. And there's a wonderful balance there between the freedom to improvise and the freedom to invent, but having some structure in place that allows you to do that. And we think that has a wonderful sort of reflection onto business and onto how we run our lives. So how does this impact itself on leadership and the future of leadership? Many things are taking place. Demographics are changing. The baby boomer generation, of which I am one of maybe the youngest as a sort of mid-60s child, is now literally fading into history somehow. We're beginning to retire, but also the values and the motivations of the baby boomer generation are beginning to drift away. Gen X and millennials we've been talking about for the last 15 years as the key future demographic, are now becoming the leaders. But even now, Gen Z are becoming the founders, the entrepreneurs. They're becoming the new influencers and the new challengers around us. And so we have to understand how we reflect those new cultures, those new habits and those new rituals within organizations and within the spaces that allow those people to work. There's new expectations and there's new values. And some of these images may feel like a cliche of what it is like to be a hipster or yoga at lunchtime, but actually they are truthfully changing. They're no longer a startup culture. They are beginning to unpick the way large-scale organizations are behaving and how they attract talent. And we know that the war of talent is a key part of the health and well-being of organizations, is pulling together the right quality of people and working with them. So we really have to understand that. So out of those things become new work styles, and that is where we came to develop Ports. And now I'm going to give you just a few minutes of an expression of where that thinking started to apply itself into a physical collection of furniture. The process was multi-layered at a physical level. On one level, the top left image was about ergonomics. We really started to think around how we physically inhabit space and furniture when we're trying to work. And we know now from the lounge settings of the past 10 years, it's no longer, a desk is no longer the space where we can work. I'm sitting in a lounge chair now with an old school desk in front of me because it's the space that I find most comfortable for this type of work. But clearly, there are many other moments in the day when you need different types of setting. There's also this key idea coming up, which is around this spatial, how can you separate different functions of work from a very private experience to a very public and collaborative experience. So Ports as a collection is made up of 3 parts, which are classical in a way. There's a table series, there's a storage collection, and there's a lounge collection. We really wanted to try and balance this idea of a private office and a shared and open collaborative setting. And that there is still need for privacy in leadership. There's a moment when we need to retreat and become more inward looking, where we're reflecting on a moment a day, planning, and it becomes very much a private and a personal experience. And there are other moments when we're really looking out and trying to figure out how we are working with other people. And actually there are many layers to that as well. So a key part of this was this idea of a sort of duality of a private experience and a public experience. And we created this these 4 key experiences that we have actually become the foundation of the collection, where on any one day you have a solo life, but then you have a collaborative life. But in the collaborative life, there are these 3 different layers. There's a peer-to-peer interaction, there's a team interaction, and then there's a client or a professional interaction. And even the peer-to-peer is different to team. So peer-to-peer is very informal because I'm talking with my board members or with other people at my level, if you like. A team experience might be to do with HR, it might be to do with a collaboration with my working team. And then a partner for a client experience becomes much more formal. So each one of these 4 experiences have quite different choreography, human choreography that we have to understand, but they're all taking space and taking place within the same environment. And that's what we were trying to unpick. So these are some of the images from the collection. This is the lounge, the task lounge, which is actually very much a workspace, although built within this comfort. And it feels almost like a business class seat. We've done a lot of design around that area, where we've really tried to understand this balance between an ergonomic space and a comfort space, but also one that is active. We made a couple of key observations here. On the right, you can see the product in 2 settings. One is in its lounge setting at the top, and the other one, we've created this, what we call the forward tilt on the seat. That sets you forward, which really changes the blood flow through your body, and it allows you to work in a very different and active way. And that really sets up in a way this daily or hourly ritual of work, from an informal and a mind process to an active and a thinking and maybe a digital experience of emailing or talking or telecommunicating online. The collection is very highly crafted, and even though we wanted the collection in a way to be democratic, we also wanted to still celebrate the best making that we can. And so there are elements here of leather and of beautiful anodized materials and of this 3D ply on the molded veneer on the tabletop, which really create a new level of craft that we're very excited by for Bene. Privacy is another layer. We want people to be able to retreat into their own space. We also want people to have, if someone is traveling the day after or the day before, they're arriving, they need a clean shirt, their overnight bag needs parking somewhere, they need to prepare themselves for a client experience. These are the sort of elements of your daily life that we wanted to really try and understand and celebrate. And flexibility. We wanted this collection ergonomically to facilitate both the most comfortable but also the most agile. So we've introduced standing sit-stand tables into the collection, so you really can change your dynamic, change your ergonomics, and change your sort of physical dynamic very fast, and really in response to a daily activities that may be 5 different activities in a day, and you're constantly flipping between those, and they all take place within the same experience. And at the bottom of it is informality. We wanted a place to be still, it's less about hierarchy. It's less about a traditional view of management, which is always about top down. There's an eye-to-eye and a peer-to-peer experience here, which is very high quality, but it's also that informality breeds sort of confidence, and we think a culture that is really appropriate for where we are now. A couple of other bits of research that informed our thinking. This is what we call the Majlis, which is one of the informal meeting spaces, and it's taken from North African Gulf traditions, where leaders would sit in a circle or in a square, but without any table surface in the middle. And we felt that it was a really interesting pointer to future leadership. It's not always about the formality of the boardroom. It's about being able to come together in comfort, but it's more about the conversation, and it's more about the interaction. It's not about the static hierarchy of the boardroom table. And this is the expression of that in the collection. So you can see, just to finish off, we have this dynamic collection of different elements that facilitate both your own physical needs in terms of a private or a collaborative experience, but also the dynamic quality between working with people in a one-to-one private kind of space, or a much more dynamic digital and physical space. So I'm just going to take us back to the first slide. Leadership is about, we have to understand how leadership is about responding to change and responding to the world that we're in. And hopefully, Ports as a collection sets up a new democratic and a new level of ergonomics and of choreography that allow people to lead in a collaborative and an open way, and it's in a very different culture to the traditional hierarchy that we're trying to replace. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom, for this very fresh and different view on leadership and collaboration, and it was very complementary to Elke's talk as well. So indeed, I already have a very large questions, which is actually 2 questions from our audience. I will read it to you. So will COVID, and by that way that person means disinfection and flex desks, have an impact on your next furniture development? That's the first part. And how do you see the new office environment taking into account the leadership and collaboration aspects and increasing artificial intelligence? So you see, it's a very big one.
Yes, well, I think I'll try and answer bits of that. I think clearly the working from home culture that we've all experienced in the last 6 months as a result of COVID is here to stay. And I think Elke touched on this idea that the technological revolution is accelerating through COVID, but actually we see that happening across multiple strands. Multiple types of social or cultural change that were slowly building up even 6 months ago are being forced forward. Now, some of those will be temporary and some of those will be permanent. And this is one of the great challenges that we have. I'll give you an example on the working from home. We were chatting to a manufacturer recently who, instead of delivering, they had an order for 5,000 desks. And instead of, when they asked for the delivery address, they were given 5,000 delivery addresses because they were all being sent to people's homes. So that, at a purely physical and furniture design aspect, that completely changes the way you think about design, the way you think about the assembly of a product, the way you think about the scale of the product, the shipping of the product. So in very practical ways, that is a huge impact. Now, whether or not the working from home culture stays, it may still stay at 40% even after a vaccine hopefully emerges. There is a high chance that many of us will make personal choices, lifestyle choices that will continue the home working. But also it's clear that organizations are beginning to understand the economic benefits of not having to have people all coming into a single space every day. It will start to challenge the cities, it will start to challenge transport systems, all those things. It's like the chaos theory. One event has this chaotic repercussions across so many different strands. And going back to the main organizational part, we've actually just moved into a new building ourselves, and we are trying to reconfigure it mentally, how we use that space, how we interact with our team at the right moments to both be safe and to be effective. And we know that it's a perfect balance we need to find, and it's not an easy balance to find between a technological, it's blended learning. It's like the university sector. It's blended work between a technological and a digital experience and a physical one. I'm not sure I'm answering all your questions there.
I think you've covered most of it, because I'm checking also other questions. One would be, for example, how does leadership respond to COVID? That would be another question from the previous question.
Well, I think it is the perfect black swan event.
Yes.
COVID. And it's really, all the management books around how to lead will set up this idea that how do you manage the unexpected? And someone was asking us the difference between management and leadership. Management maybe is much more about process. It's about following policies. It's when the sailing boat is sailing just fine. Leadership is when you're both planning for the future but responding to the crisis, where you really have to be on your toes. And being a keen sailor, when you suddenly get a new wind coming across your bows and the boat is unstable, this is the moment when all your skills are at their most tested. And I think right now, every leader, whether it's from a family or from a country or from an organization around the world, is being tested at our greatest, because we're having to react to this extraordinary chaotic experience.
Thank you. I have one last question for you, Tom, and we'll wrap it up. What keeps you up at night as far as design?
That's a good question.
Isn't it?
Well, I haven't been sleeping well for the last 3 or 4 months, it's true. So I've been waking very early and my brain floods in with all these issues, and it's sometimes difficult to unpick them. And weirdly, as a designer, sometimes you're thinking about the smallest detail, the very smallest detail, which keeps you awake just as much as the biggest. In a way, that's what design should be like, because we care about detail and we also care about the big picture. So there's a funny balance between, it can be the way in which a door closes in our new building, or it can be the future of COVID, in the aviation sector. So there's a kind of, our brain is very muddled in that sense. And I'm now trying to find a new way of sleeping at night, because I think I have to retrain my brain to calm down. And maybe I should follow some of Elke's advice on that.
Yes, and maybe it's one of your future projects as well.
Yes, hopefully.
Thank you so much, Tom, for your time and your explanation. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Julia.
We will continue with our last speaker. Saskia van Uffelen. Saskia, welcome.
Hi, Julia.
Hey. So Saskia has been working in the ICT and telecom business for more than 25 years and is now the corporate vice president of the French IT company GFI. But Saskia has also been appointed digital champion to represent Belgium at the European Commission for the execution of the digital agenda. And in 2011, Data News proclaimed her ICT Woman of the Year. Since then, she has emerged as a role model, not only as a top manager, but also as a female entrepreneur who knows how to combine a busy job with a family of 5 children.
And the husband.
Saskia, and I haven't said that.
Thank you, Julie.
So, you're welcome.
Thanks for the introduction. And indeed, what is important is that I'm going to share a little bit also the operational experience that I have. A lot of things have already been said by Elke or Tom, but how can we handle that being still responsible for the end of the quarter? I think we are great times we are living in. The only question is, what will we do with it? And the reason why I'm digital champion is a little bit my social responsibility. I don't have a team. I don't receive money for it. It's an honor that the Belgian government gives me every year and that I can do with European Commission. But it's more that how can we create a society for the next generations, but also take into consideration that we have challenges like how can we keep to connect elderly people. In the last months have been showing that just distributing tablets without any explanation on how they can be used to do video calls for your grandmothers and your granddads is not a complete solution. If we continue with that one, one of my biggest troubles what I'm having being an operational manager is that we have been focusing a lot on welfare. We were always obliged to do more with less, and making the quarter results and making the budgets, and I think it's a little bit like pulling on the elastic. If you pull on an elastic in front of your nose, the elastic breaks and it goes flat in your face. And I think we were coming on a moment that we need to not maybe find a balance between welfare and well-being, but at least harmony, because my harmony is maybe a different balance than it is for somebody else. But the balance or refining a new harmony is a critical one. If we then continue, and I'm just waiting for my slides. If I was asked to do a kind of an expert role, then we come in a kind of a brainstorm session, and brainstorm sessions often happens, everybody gives ideas, and then they start pointing out their fingers. Yeah, but that's the responsibility of the government, that's the responsibility of my boss, that's the responsibility of my partner. But ladies and gentlemen, know that if you point out to somebody else, there are always 3 fingers pointing to yourself. And that's why I said, I need to do something myself. And the book was printed in February, and the title is There for Tomorrow. And today I maybe should have called it There for Today, because I was describing how the society is changing for me as an operational manager, but also for me as a people responsible, or also for me as an individual, as CEO of my own life. What is the society? How is the society changing? But how is also, how long can we still continue to do what we were doing yesterday? How long can we still discuss that we do not have enough money to pay the social security? How long can we still complain that we have an issue of having burnouts? And then a lot of people say, yeah, but you know, Saskia, I've got the age that I've done my career, still two years to go, and you know, that's not for me anymore, it's for the next one. I personally, I do not want to push my problems of today that I can solve today to the next generation. I think it's my social responsibility to do something about it. And for those who know me better, I'm coming from a telecom sector. I do not have a lot of confidence in the Chinese, but there is one sentence that I will always remember. You need to buy an umbrella when the sun is shining. And maybe those who woke up as of March, maybe they bought their umbrella a little bit too late because the rain was already there. You needed to take proactively some decisions in your organization or in your team. So let me first run through the aspect of the digital. And I'm not an engineer, I normally should be in front of the classroom, but this is for me creating an image of what digital transformation is about. It is not about technology. How would you feel if I would turn my back to you and do a webinar with my back turned to the camera? Making selfies creates a culture in a society where people turn their back to the most important person in the room. This is what digital transformation is about. And obviously technology, and lucky we had the technology since March, because yes, we were still connected. We still had the buildings, we still had the roads, and we still had the connectivity and the technology to make it possible to continue our professional activities and private communication. But the fact that everything and everybody is connected, which is not a goal, it is already the reality of today, creates a completely different challenge for me as an entrepreneur. Because before, when I started my career, when we made a business plan, we decided as a management team what the customer would buy 3 years from now. I would say that he would buy a green chair with white dots in a retail shop in my region. And guess what? The world is now upside down. It are the customers who are deciding what a company should do. So now we have customers who say, I want a white chair, and I want a white chair with 3 legs, and I want to have it delivered tomorrow in Londerzeel. And it is for those organizations or those people who are flexible to adapt to that change who will succeed. We are not living in a world, in a classical world as we have known on selling and buying, because the youngsters are sharing. They're sharing cars, they're sharing houses. So how can an insurance sector take the opportunity of a change in the society because of everybody being connected? One element which is pretty difficult, and certainly for a country like Belgium, where we have a very silo way of working. We have the sector of the finance, we have the sector of logistics, we have the sector of architects, we have the sector of transport, of education. And guess what? Your competition will not come out of your sector. I've seen in a previous presentation of Tom the logo of Uber. Why is Uber annoying? Just because we couldn't, in our mindset, split a taxi and a driver. And that's the only thing that Uber did. And you could argue if it's a transport company, you could argue if it's a company, but you could also argue if it's an IT company, because the only thing they're doing is invoicing a distance. And that is also used in other business models. The competition of education will not come out of education. The competition of the finance sector will not come out of the finance sector, and maybe not necessarily out of your country by this at the same time. Because everybody is connected and everything is connected. That's why the data is that important. And yes, people say that the data is gold and that the ones who have the capacity to handle it in the most intelligent and secure way is the winner of tomorrow. But there is one thing I want to point out on data. Yes, we have GDPR. I personally say maybe a little bit too complex and a little bit too late. But a more important thing, and there I can hope that I can have the help of each of the 160 people who are online now, we are responsible to handle that data in an ethical way. That's not a responsibility of the management. That's not a responsibility of the chief digital officer or the IT. It's each individual. I'm also a member of a local social media team. If I see how adults communicate on social media, I'm sorry to say, but we are a role model. Don't be surprised if adults communicate in a certain way that kids will do the same thing. And that's where suicide for teenagers is then one of the consequences we can do. So online ethics is an enormous aspect, and that will also bring trust and safety in the elements going forward. So yes, the technology has a big impact, but for me as a leader, as an operational responsible, this is not the only boundaries I have. I can't make the quarter anymore. I can maybe make the quarter another quarter, but then it's over. I can use technology to automate my sales team, but I can only, and then make an efficiency improvement, but I can only do it once. So what will I do next quarter? And I think we need to realize that we also are pulling at the elastic of our financial models. Maybe we should realize that making profit every quarter is not necessarily the most important aspect of valorizing the results and the success of your organizations. A lot of people say, yeah, Saskia, you know, I'm pretty good in automation, digital transformation, okay, but most of them are focusing on automation of the process of yesterday. And now it is the first wave you see. People are forced to stay at home. They will maybe slightly come back to what is called an office. And yes, we need to control them, so we will automate the process. So we are still doing exactly the same thing as we did the year before, but we can survive, and we do it in a less cost model, because we even realized the last months that we still have people that we could argue if they have a value add. This has nothing to do with innovation. This has nothing to do with disruption. And getting a call and saying, Saskia, I've fully disrupted because I've indicated a team who needs to do something with robots or something about AI. This is not what disruption is about. Disruption is creating a vision. If I cannot realize my quarterly results, my short-term results anymore, how am I going to behave going forward? And what will be my competition? What will be my flag? What will be my goal? Another element where we are on the limits is the way we treat, for me, the most important capital, which is the human capital in an organization. I'm heading up a services organization. If I don't have my people, then I'm alone and I will not do any business. And it is a reality that younger generations are more assertive, and I'm more from the silent generation. But it is also the fact that they will not accept it anymore. And it's not only about young generations, it's about how can we go from diversity tick in the box. Yes, I have a youngster. Yes, I have somebody with a different culture. How can we go from that culture to a real inclusive culture, where we do not create an organization trying to focus on one size fits all, but try to really create a new culture based on sustainable goals, which can train the organization for tomorrow. So there are multiple reasons to make a transition. So one of two elements which I've taken for myself. First, you need to start focusing on long-term thinking. I had to do a presentation to one of the governmental parties. I told them roughly, I said, maybe you will lose the next round. Maybe that's a good point to lose the next round. Maybe it's a good point not to make your quarter, but at least create now the necessarily change, necessarily air in the organization to be ready to have a different culture from controlling to trusting, which will work in an ecosystem which is not based in your sector, but which is an ecosystem which is much broader, and maybe also have a discussion with people you never known or businesses you have never known. I personally, I do love to combine different roles because it also helped me to give new insights on that aspect. And that is the aspect of lifelong learning. Elke was referring to technology will take over jobs. We've done a study specifically for Belgium. For each job that will disappear because of technology, we will create 3 new jobs. But obviously, everybody needs to speak the digital language. I do not expect everybody to be an AI engineer, but knowing the basics of AI and that social media is influenced by AI, and that if I do some accesses to financial organizations that I can get AI algorithms behind, the basics should be the basic language that everybody learns and relearn every day. It is not about, okay, then I have to do, and then I'll stop my company for 6 months and restart something. No, I do understand. I have challenges. I still need to realize my quarterly results for myself as a manager or as a leader, but in the same time, I need to create a future, and that will be balancing, that will make the future of organizations. Just as the last part, how did I do it? Because it's easy to say, yeah, Saskia, okay, everybody says that I have to do it, but how do I start? So 7 steps that I describe in my book, which maybe can give you some ideas on how to start it tomorrow. 7 steps which are valid for you as a CEO, which are valid for you if you are a manager, but which are all valid for you because everybody is CEO of their own life. I'm CEO of my life. I need to decide where I want to be as well professional as an individual going forward. So the first step is we are talking about a cultural shift. And a cultural shift is changing the smallest hard disk because this is the hard disk between the 2 ears. It takes time. We need to go from a controlling culture in organizations where normally the hierarchy will determine who can decide, and then we will go 1 floor down and 1 floor down and 1 floor down. The numbers of windows is defined on the number of stars and stripes and seniority. We need to go down from a controlling because people will not work in the office anymore. So how can I control them? How can I be sure that they are working? Are questions asked these days. We need to go to an organization where intrapreneurship is the culture. People need to be learned to take initiative again. Now, coming from controlling to trusting, that takes time. And let me reassure you, and I think it was Tom who said there is a difference between a manager and a leader. But today, after COVID, we're still working with a lot of people managers. They are there, they are good persons, but they were hired with a set of competences which were needed to handle the organization and the teams yesterday. And that could have been done in the controlling mode. The person is in the office at 9, the person leaves at 5, he's working, that's what he thinks. That's the easy stuff. Now we need people who are trusting people. Now we need people who can motivate people while not having them necessarily 5 days a week in front of them. So how do you transform a people manager to a people leader? Because that is a critical element. Even if the CEO is convinced, the people are asking these days because of the last changes we've had, but we still have a lot of what I call men with blue suits and brown shoes in the middle, just doing the same, having the same behavior and the same competences as yesterday. So that requires this very specific focus. 2 words that may help me to really understand what kind of a culture do I have. Appreciative understanding. In diversity, going from diversity to inclusion is appreciative understanding. I appreciate, when I was younger, I tried to convince everybody of my opinion. Now I appreciate different opinions. I understand them. That doesn't mean that I have to agree, but at least I'm open for other opinions. I'm positively appreciate them, and I can work with those additional elements to make the next step. When you make it cultural change, you need to have everybody. I mean, everybody is everybody. Often it happens that we hire a consultant. He starts or she starts in the beginning of a quarter. It costs 3 months because that's the cost based. And then they say, yeah, we've rolled out a program, the culture has been changed. No, maybe a mail has been sent out. Maybe a team meeting has held, but taking and changing the culture of everyone in the organization takes between 3 to 5 years. So first thing is, it is a cultural change before you can act to the actions. The second step was making your cartography. And a cartography is a little bit your starting point. You know, when you buy an old house, you take the first wallpaper, then you take the second wallpaper, then you come to the wallpaper of your grandmother, and fifth, sixth, seventh, and then you have the blank wall. And it is the blank wall we need. We need to know where our organization really is. And that is not what you're going to find in the annual report. That's not what you're going to find in the management reporting that you get of the results of the last quarter. This is a part of the cartography. What are the expectations of my people? How do they see the organization today? What is my human capital really about? What do I have in house? Because let's be honest, when I hear we're going to lay off 1,500 people because I'm going to hire 200, those 200 will not be available with the right skills. So we better start focusing on the human capital we already have, but then you need really to know what kind of an infrastructure do I have today? Because that is also part. If I'm working for a very controlling organization, most likely I will still have different levels, doors and windows based on the seniority of people. But that's not bad. You just have to take that into consideration. You also need to measure the well-being, and you can measure the well-being in organization. Sometimes for certainly in an engineering world where I've have the habit of working in, yeah, it's less KPI driven, it's less factual, but you can also decide and ask questions on where are we with the well-being. Social media creates also a lot of information about your organization. What do they say about my organization? What do they say about me as CEO of my own life? What do they say about me as a people manager? What do I read? What do I hear? It's sometimes much better than numbers in a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint. Am I really sustainable today? And that sustainability is not enough to discuss about CO2, but it's also in all levels. Do I print a lot? Do I how do I behave with my people? How do I communicate with the outside world? How do I fix my objectives? Who are the shareholders of the organization? Are all elements. So making that cartography is important, because if you do take the wrong starting point, then your action plan will bring you to the wrong results. We have the culture, we have the cartography. The third step is putting your flag. Putting the flag is the responsible of the CEO. You, as responsible for your life, you need to put your flag. Where do you see? And the CEO should put the flag for the organization. And when you put a flag, and you have put your personal flag also, then shoot for the moon. By my experience, if you put the flag too short term, you will find a lot of excuses why you can't realize. Dare to dream, dare to shoot for the moon, because it's only by shooting the moon that you will reach the stars. But put the flag far enough in time, because that will take away a lot of resistance of the organization, of the people, in order to go for it. And if you have put the flag, if the flag is well defined, then you can start communicating. One of the recommendations I do these days is don't, if you're looking for efficiency improvement after this period, don't do it on communication. We are in crisis. It's now in crisis that we never can communicate enough. So certainly on the budget of marketing, on the budget of communication, internal and internal, external, you need to keep the necessarily time, resources, because that is critical. It's not that me as a person or me as a CEO, I have defined where the company wants to go, It takes time and it takes means to communicate it to the rest of the organization. If you have focused on communication, then only then you can start building your action plan. And one error that I've made multiple times, I've started too soon, too fast, starting making actions. Do you know a little bit the idea of, the margin is under pressure, we will make an action plan? Well, the action plan of the last month was not executed yet. And then just before closure of the quarter, they say, yeah, but now we're not going to do it because we need to focus on the short term. So if you only can make if you can make first your cartography, if you can fix your long-term plan, then you can start drafting the action plan. And the action plan, yes, obviously, it's getting ideas out of the organization. Recommendation from my side, do not include your management team. Because your management team will only, in the majority of the cases, say what the boss wants to hear. I would like to know what the rest of the organization is feeling. And yes, if there is not a culture yet where sharing ideas is allowed, we have to relearn people to share an idea. And basic rules as never destroy an idea in the first 10 seconds, I've learned because I'm working in the engineer sector. And I had already, when youngsters were saying some things, the engineers were saying it will not be possible, the boss will not accept, we will not have money. So you need to define some rules in order to create a culture where sharing ideas is allowed. If you're stuck in the organization and nobody dares, one thing which helped me a lot is asking them, yeah, but if you would be CEO. And then when Elke was referring to the complaining aspects, a lot of complaints fall away. They say, yeah, but if I was CEO, then I would do it completely different. And then you're starting to get a connection with the organization. When you start new ideas, for every new idea you start, you also should stop ideas. We can't do more. Remember, pulling on the elastic, we can't do more. So we also need to give air to the organization and allow them or force them to stop some previous initiatives. Focus in your initiatives not only on welfare initiatives, but also on the harmony between well-being. And if you regroup all those initiatives, you can cluster them. And I can say you upfront, and that's also what I've written in my book, I can say you upfront, if you cluster them, you will have 6 to 7 clusters. You will have a cluster about customers, you will have a cluster about learning, you will have a cluster about numbers. But it's not important that I know which kind of clusters I have. It is important that we took the time to create in the organization a bottom-up and a horizontal feedback, and that it's the organization who have created the different actions where we can improve in order to reach the goal. And if you have your action plan, then you can allocate the champions. I think Elke also had made a reference to it. A champion for me can be anywhere in the organization outside of your management team. For the same reasons, if you want to change the culture, you need to change a behavior of, I am also CEO of this organization. I'm also CEO of a project which can help the organization to reach the objective. And guess what? Also for the younger generation, having a purpose where I can help is a pretty important aspect. Champions are early adapters, and you will always find champions. You only have to look for them. You only have to ask the right question, and you only have to look horizontal, vertical, and outside of your classical suspects. If a champion says, yeah, but okay, I want to realize an idea, there again, if you are a champion of an idea, you're CEO of that idea. I allow you to execute the idea, but you need to take the full aspect. So if you have somebody say, yeah, I could do a fantastic thing, but I need 6 people during 5 months and I need money for it, then my answer is very simple. Then you need to find the money yourself. If you have the champions, you will have pioneer projects, and about those pioneer projects, you need to communicate. And working around the infrastructure and the inside of your building could be one of the seeds, can be a pioneer project which is dropped on that moment. And then the last step, which was for me one of the most difficult ones, be patient. I've been learned and trained in a 3-month or quarterly schema. this is not going to make a quarter. This is going to take 3 years to 5 years. So I need to learn to be patient, because some of those projects will succeed. Some of those projects will not succeed. But is that not about entrepreneurship, that you can also learn about things that didn't succeed? So I hope with those 7 elements, I can inspire you also to dare for yourself, a CEO of your own career, or maybe you as a people manager who wants to become a people leader, or you as a CEO, to help us to change the world to a better society for the next generation. I wish you all the luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Saskia. That was a great last speech. I'm glad we could listen to you. I already have some questions from our audience. Because we are also talking to architects here,
Yes,
one of them would like to
now.
know. You mentioned changing the building, changing the design. When should a company or an organization change the interior design of its building, especially nowadays? What is a good timing?
I think it's a very important question, and it's maybe the same answer for technology as for the inside of the interior of the building, because it depends on kind of where do you want to go, what kind of culture you want to reach. The way you make your office needs to confirm the same aspects. If you are having a gap between your flag and what you will do as an inside, the colors, the temperature, the ambiance, yeah, then it will be very difficult to get your team to answer. I would say certainly not too early. It's better to do it late in the process when you have all insights, and make it the last bullet confirming all different elements you did earlier.
Okay, so first follow the 7 steps and then roll it out.
Yeah, you need to define upwards what you want to have. Otherwise, I can imagine for an architect like Tom, if you do not know what you want, then it will be very difficult for him to help you. And people do that with IT, external parties the same. They come outside and they say, I want something with AI. Yeah, then it's very difficult to help. So first decide what you really want to have, where you really want to go, and then you can be a good partner of Tom and Benny, I think.
Okay. We had also a question which you partially answered, but it's how much time between a controlling culture and an entrepreneurial
yeah.
culture. You mentioned 3 to 5 years. Why does it take so long?
Yeah, firstly, it's not a quarter. So everything beyond a quarter is already a long time. It's not going to make a calendar year, because a calendar year is only 4 quarters. And you know, we always have the year-end peak. It's not proving to have a long-term vision. And the things which we need to change, for example, competition is not coming out of the sector, requires firstly to have a very good reflection on where will my organization be in 2030. If I'm starting today as, let's take as an example, I'm a financial organization, a bank, because changes happen everywhere, but never in the banks. And you have an initiative which is called CAKE in Europe, which is a small startup having a financial license, a little bit annoying everybody like Uber. Yeah, then suddenly all trees start shaking, and all walls start shaking, and you can maybe for a quarter say I push them back, regulation and whatever, but they will pop up anyhow. So firstly, it takes already time to better understand where will my organization be. That's the first step. Second step, if you talk about people are not computers, and I'm a digital champion. Yes, we can. They can do a lot for us, and like was said in one of the slides of Elke, I think we need to start focusing on what they can do. But we have an empathical behavior. We feel, we sense, we combine all aspects. That makes the human being very complex. And if you have learned them in a professional environment, the boss is the one who can speak and you have to listen. And if you're not on the 3rd floor, then you will never become, etc., etc. We need to relearn people to work in flat organizations. I'm being trusted again. I've said sometimes the world has been for the extrovert for years. We could hug, we could shake hands, we could go to mass events. And now the world is for the introverts. They feel great these days. They do not have to shake hands. They do not have to hug. They do not have to go to multiple events. They can do it on a webinar in their site. So people are complex things, and you will have early adapters. You will always have champions who will be there with you from day one, but that will be the minority. So making the plan, looking for your minority of champions when you have is already a year. And then, you know, it goes, I've been long in acquisitions, the good and the bad. We are good, but they are bad. First year, it's still the red and the blue ones. And then the second year, they say, well, you know, I'm a blue one, but that red one is not too bad neither. And then after third year, you have hired new people. So they don't understand what red and blue means. And all those aspects, you can't speed them up. You need to go through all those moments. And at the end of the 3 years for very fast organizations who maybe started better, at the end you will have a minority of people who will never adapt to that new organization. But I think in my experience, 90% of the people you can get with you if you take the time.
Thank you, Saskia. That made it quite clear. So thank you so much for your talk. Very inspiring and global talk about organization, but also people. I think everyone loved to hear that. Now I will say that's all the time that we have for Online Expert Talk today. So please look for a follow-up email so you can rewatch it, of course. And on behalf of Elke, Tom, and Saskia, as well as the teams of Bene, Nespresso Professional, and Living Tomorrow, thank you for joining us and taking the time to view our presentations. My name is Julia Jolly. Have a great day.